the channel, and today I'm going to do a quick comparison between two very different smartphones, you could say. One of them is the Motorola G31 and the second is the Honor X7. Now, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. These are two very different smartphones running stock Android and Magic UI, but Honor's back using Google services. So I think it's actually a good time to start putting Honor back in these smartphone comparisons. So if you're interested to see how these two phones compare, and at the time of this video, they are around the same price. I paid $150 for the G31 and the Honor X7 is around $160 at the moment. So if you're interested, stick around. Okay, so I'm just going to start by talking about the Motorola G31. So I'll start with the display, as like we always do, and it has a 6.4-inch AMOLED display with a standard 60Hz refresh rate and a 1080p resolution. So it's an upgrade in resolution from the older Motorola G30, but it is a downgrade in terms of the refresh rate, as the G30 did come with a 90Hz display. It's quite a vibrant display as well, especially when you have the settings turned to saturated. It does kind of boost the colours a little bit too much for my liking, especially when you're taking photos. It actually looks like the photos themselves are over processed and all that sort of stuff, but it isn't actually until you take the photos off and look at them on a laptop screen or computer screen or whatever that they actually look a little bit more normal. So it's a little bit misleading, especially with that saturated setting turned up. But then on the flip side, when you do turn it down to standard, it makes the colours look really dull. So there's kind of nothing in between, which is a bit of a shame with this display. But other than that, it's really nice. It's detailed. There's no noticeable pixels or anything like that. And just navigating through the interface is absolutely fine on the G31. As for performance, you get a MediaTek Helio G85 processor, which is built on a slightly older 12nm fabrication, but that is because the G85 did come out back in 2020. So a new phone with an old processor, that is just something to bear in mind if you are considering the G31. But that performance is backed up by 4GB of RAM and 64GB of expandable storage. So although the storage is a little bit low by today's standards, you have got that option to add a micro SD card if you need to. And then on the back, you get a triple camera system headlined by a 50MP f1.8 primary camera, an f2.2 8MP ultra wide camera, and then a standard macro camera, which you do find on a lot of other budget phones anyway. Video tops out at 1080p at 30fps on the G31, as does it top out at that resolution from the 13MP selfie camera. You also get a large 5000 mAh battery packed inside the Motorola G31, which should provide all-day battery life, no problem at all. And the G31 does support up to 20-watt charging as well, which of course is pretty slow by today's standards, but if you're someone like me who charges their phone overnight, it's not really the end of the world. And as for software on the Motorola G31, it is running, unfortunately, the older Android 11, but with the standard Motorola stock Android experience. So there's no skin like One UI or anything like that over the top of this. It's very much a Google Pixel kind of experience, like what you find with other Motorola devices. And if you have a Motorola or you have used them in the past, you'll be very much aware of that. So moving on now to the Honor X7. The front of the Honor X7 is a much larger 6.7-inch display with a 720p resolution and a 90Hz refresh rate. So unfortunately, this is dropped from a 1080p panel on the G31 down to a 720p here on the Honor X7, but it is boosted from a 60 to a 90Hz refresh rate. And to be honest, the fact that this has a 720p panel on a 6.7-inch canvas, I did think that would be a bit of an issue, but for me, it's not been an issue at all. I mean, it's very clear, it's a really nice display, and it hasn't got that saturated issue that I found with the Motorola G31. At the top of the X7, you don't unfortunately have a punch hole cutout, you just have a little dewdrop notch with an 8MP selfie camera. This tops out at 1080p at 30fps, and then at the bottom you just have an ever so slight chin like you do have on the Motorola G31. Flipping the phone over, and again, a plastic back. I've got the Honor X7 in titanium silver, but it is also available in midnight black and ocean blue. And you have a quad camera system on the back of the X7, headlined by a 48 megapixel primary camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 2 megapixel macro and depth cameras. So it's using one of the older 48 megapixel sensors as opposed to the newer 50 megapixels of the G31. And it also drops the resolution of the ultra wide from 8 megapixels down to 5 megapixels. Now, in the majority of photos, you probably won't notice a huge amount of difference there, but if you are blowing the photos up slightly bigger, then that's when you will notice. But on your screens, you probably won't notice a huge difference anyway. As for RAM, I've got 4 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. That is expandable on the Honor X7 as well. So one benefit of the X7 over the G31 is you have more base storage and you can also upgrade it as well. And then processing power comes from a Snapdragon 680 processor, which is a 4G processor. So unfortunately, no 5G on either of these smartphones. And performance-wise is very similar to the G85. It does perform a little bit better on the multi-core score. Other than that, they are quite similar. The 680 is also built on a more efficient 6nm process, so battery life and efficiency of this processor will be a little bit better on the X7, although it is running a bigger display, but the display is dropped to 720p. So overall, you're going to get some really great battery life out of the Honor X7. So now that I've gone through the specs of both of the phones, I'm just going to do some camera samples of both of these phones and talk a little bit about how both of them perform. So this is the video quality on both the Honor X7 and the Motorola G31. So the audio here is coming from the Honor X7, and then the audio here is coming from the Motorola G31. Now on the display, the G31 looks better. The colours look more natural. The colours look very dull on the Honor X7, but it'd be interesting to know what they look like once they're up on my computer screen. Now this is the video on both the Honor X7 and the Motorola G31 from the main camera. The Honor X7 has a much wider crop than what the Motorola G31 has. But again, the G31 has a more saturated look again on the display. But it'd be interesting to know what it looks like when it's up on the screen. Okay, and lastly, I just want to really quickly touch on the photo quality from both the G31 and the Honor X7. For the most part, coming from the main camera, results are pretty similar. There's plenty of detail in both. The Motorola tends to go more sort of natural colours than what the X7 does, but then Huawei and I suppose Honor at the time were always known for their AI modes and boosted saturation and all that sort of stuff. So that is definitely apparent on the Honor X7. So I do sway towards the G31 a little bit more when it comes to natural reproduction of the colours, despite what is showing on the display. When it comes to the ultra wide, the Motorola G31 definitely has the better ultra wide here. Although it's only a few megapixels more, there is definitely a lot more detail in the shots from the G31. The X7 photos, you can tell there's definitely a lot of smudgy areas, especially in areas where there's lots of detail needed, such as leaves and stuff on the trees and on the grass. I do find that the Motorola G31 is better with regards to the ultra wide. When it comes to macro shots, they're basically the same. They're both 2 megapixels. There's not a huge amount of quality. There's not a huge amount to touch on the macro shots. And lastly, if I just quickly talk about selfie photos, you get an 8 megapixel selfie camera on the Honor X7 and a 13 megapixel on the Motorola G31. For the most part, they perform quite similar. There is noticeable skin smoothing going on with the Honor X7, which again is something that they used to do when they were part of Huawei, and obviously Huawei do it as well. And the colour is a little bit different as well. On the Motorola G31, it actually does pick up the correct red of my shirt and also the Tech Talk logo behind me. Whereas on the Honor X7, it kind of goes in sort of a more pinkish sort of hue. So for the most part, I think the G31 produces some more natural photos with more natural colours. And I think that answers the question of which one's better. So in terms of a camera producing better quality photos, I would definitely sway towards the G31 for better and kind of more natural looking photos than what the X7 tends to produce. But let me know in the comments what you think of the photos from both of these phones, and also which one you would pick out of the two, or whether you would pick the G31 over the more stock Android experience, or whether you would sway more towards the X7 with its magic UI and all that sort of stuff as well. So let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching this little comparison, and I'll see you in the next one.